I remember the exact moment I realized Earth had been fighting a war for 10,000 years and nobody told us. I was standing in the observation deck of the UNSS Prometheus, watching Mars burn from orbit when the transmission came through. Not on any channel we'd been using, not on any frequency humanity had ever broadcast on. It came through the ship itself, through the hull, through the very atoms of the metal and the space around us. And when it spoke in a voice that made my bones vibrate like tuning forks. "The trial period has ended," it said. "Humanity's quarantine is lifted. Welcome to the war." That was 3 hours ago. 3 hours since I learned that every star in the night sky was a battlefield. 3 hours since I discovered that my species had been protected, isolated, kept in the dark like children while the galaxy burned around us. 3 hours since the shields came down, and I saw what the universe really looked like when you weren't hiding behind walls built by civilizations so ancient they'd forgotten their own names. My name is Alan Evo, commander of Earth's 5th Expeditionary Fleet, and I'm going to tell you how we went from building colonies on Mars to fighting for survival against enemies we can't even see in a war we never knew existed for reasons no one will explain. I'm going to tell you because someone needs to remember what happened up here before the silence takes us all, before the dark between stars becomes permanent, before the last human voice stops screaming into the void that our children deserved better than this. It started 6 months ago, before Mars burned, before the shields fell, back when we still thought the universe was ours to explore. We'd been expanding for 40 years since the first colony ships left Earth, establishing footholds on Mars, Europa, Titan, building stations in the asteroid belt, pushing further and further into the solar system like we owned it, like we had any right to be here. Like the silence we encountered everywhere we went was natural, was normal, was just the way empty space felt. I'd been stationed on the Prometheus for 2 years, overseeing mining operations in the belt, coordinating supply runs between the colonies, doing the boring work of empire building that nobody writes songs about. We were good at it, efficient, human beings doing what they do best, taking what they need and making it work. We'd found something out there in the belt, asteroid designation 2247-Kappa, and the preliminary scans showed mineral compositions that didn't match anything in our databases. New elements, new possibilities, new reasons to keep pushing forward. We sent a team to investigate: Lieutenant Sarah Voss, geologist Alan Hammond, and 3 support crew. They landed on the asteroid, set up their equipment, and started running analyses. Standard procedure. Nothing we hadn't done 100 times before. I watched from the Prometheus, monitoring their vitals, listening to their casual banter as they worked, thinking about the report I'd have to write, the logistics of setting up an extraction operation, the bureaucratic tedium that would follow. Then Hammond's voice came through, different than before, tight with something I couldn't identify. "Commander, you need to see this." I pulled up their camera feeds. They were standing in a crater on the asteroid's surface, their lights illuminating something that shouldn't exist. A structure, not natural, not human, a perfect geometric form embedded in the rock like it had always been there, like the asteroid had grown around it rather than the other way around. The surface was smooth, unmarked by the millennia of impacts that had scarred everything else, and as I watched, patterns began appearing across it. Symbols, equations, languages that shifted and changed too fast for the camera to capture. "What is that?" Voss asked, and her voice carried the same wonder I was feeling, the same realization that we'd just found proof we weren't alone. "I don't know," I said, "but don't touch it. Don't do anything until we—" But before I finished my words, Hammond reached out. Just one touch. Just his gloved hand making contact with the surface. And the universe changed. The structure didn't explode or activate or any of the dramatic things you see in movies. It did something worse. It opened. Not physically. There were no doors, no mechanisms. It just became open, like reality decided the inside and outside were the same thing now, and through that opening, I saw things that made my mind bend, trying to process them. Spaces that were too large for the structure's dimensions. Colors that existed outside the spectrum human eyes evolved to perceive. And something else, something massive and ancient and aware, looking back at us through that opening like we were insects it had just noticed under a rock. The team's vital signs spiked. Voss was screaming, but no sound came through the comm. Hammond was on his knees, his helmet cracking, spiderweb fractures spreading across the faceplate as pressure differences that shouldn't exist tried to equalize. The support crew were already dead. I could see it in their posture, the way they'd stopped moving, stopped being anything except meat in suits drifting in low gravity. "Abort!" I was shouting into the comm. "Get back to the shuttle now!" But they couldn't hear me, or they could hear me. But the thing in the structure was louder, was filling their heads with information that human brains weren't designed to hold. And I watched helplessly as Lieutenant Sarah Voss, I watched her turn to face the opening and walk toward it, drawn like a moth to flame, like she wanted it, like whatever was happening to her was better than running. The structure consumed them. That's the only word I have. They walked into that impossible opening, and they ceased to be anywhere I could detect. Their vital signs flatlined, but not like death. Like they'd never existed in the first place. Like reality was editing them out of the story. The structure sealed itself. The asteroid looked normal again, just rock and dust, and the unremarkable silence of space. And I was left staring at readouts that said 5 people had died, but couldn't tell me how or why or what I was supposed to tell their families. I ordered an immediate quarantine of the asteroid, sent drones to investigate. They got within a kilometer and stopped responding, just went dead in space like someone had flipped a switch. I filed reports with Earth Command, detailed everything I'd seen, waited for orders that would help me make sense of what I'd witnessed. Protocol Sigma 7. I'd never heard of it. Nobody on the ship had. But when I dug into the secure databases, using clearances I technically wasn't supposed to have, I found files, thousands of them, reports spanning decades, going back to the earliest deep space probes, all of them describing the same thing: structures, anomalies, places where the universe didn't behave the way it should, and a consistent pattern of those places being found, classified, buried, forgotten. We weren't the first to find alien artifacts. We were just the latest in a long line of discoveries that Earth Command had decided the public didn't need to know about. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized Earth Command knew something big, something they'd been preparing for without telling anyone what or why. That's when the war started, not with Earth. We were still ignorant, still playing at exploration while the real universe went on without us. But out there, in the dark between stars, in spaces we'd never reached and couldn't see, something had been building, something had been fighting, and our little encounter with the structure on that asteroid. That was us tripping an alarm. That was us announcing to the galaxy that humanity had finally gotten curious enough, gotten far enough, gotten too close to things we were supposed to leave alone. The first attack hit 3 days after I filed my report. Not on the Prometheus, not on the asteroid, on Mars. The colony we'd spent 40 years building, the second home we'd carved out of red dust and hope. The place where 200,000 people lived and worked and dreamed about the future. It just stopped answering hails. We were 4 days away at full burn. I didn't wait for orders. I redirected every ship in the fleet toward Mars, knowing it was probably too late. Knowing that whatever could silence an entire planet didn't care about our rescue operations, but unable to do nothing. We pushed the engines past safe limits, burned fuel we couldn't spare, arrived in orbit with half our systems redlined, and all our sensors screaming warnings we didn't understand. Mars looked normal at first. The domes were intact. The atmosphere processors were running. The lights were on in the HAB modules, visible even from orbit. Everything looked fine except for one small detail. Nobody was moving. Nobody was transmitting. Nobody was alive. We sent down teams in full hazard suits, armed with weapons that felt useless, carrying scanners that couldn't tell us what we were walking into. I led the first team myself because I couldn't ask anyone to face something I wouldn't. We landed at Olympus City, the capital, the crown jewel of Mars colonization, and we walked through streets that should have been bustling with activity and found silence. The people were still there, all of them, sitting at cafes with drinks half finished, standing in corridors mid-conversation, working at their stations, hands frozen over keyboards, eyes open, staring at nothing. Dead, but not dead in any way our medical scanners could detect. No wounds, no poison, no radiation. Their hearts had simply stopped. Their brains had simply turned off. 200,000 people had decided simultaneously to stop being alive, and the universe had obliged. I found a family in their apartment, parents and 2 kids. They were having dinner, food still on the plates. The children's faces were caught mid-laugh at something funny someone had said. Whatever killed them had been so fast, they didn't have time to register it, didn't have time to be afraid. I should have been grateful for that. I should have been relieved that they didn't suffer. Instead, I felt rage building in my chest, hot and violent and useless because someone had done this. Something had reached across space and extinguished 200,000 lights, and I didn't know who or why or how to make them pay for it. We were documenting the bodies, trying to establish a cause of death, trying to make sense of the impossible, when the transmission came through. The one I mentioned at the beginning. The one that came through the hull itself, through channels that shouldn't exist, speaking in sounds that made my bones hurt. The trial period has ended. Humanity's quarantine is lifted. Welcome to the war. And then we saw them, the shields. They'd been there all along, we just hadn't known to look. Massive structures in high orbit, arranged in a perfect grid around the entire solar system, each one the size of a small moon, each one generating fields that bent space itself, that created walls between us and the rest of the universe. They'd been protecting us, hiding us, keeping us safe while we grew from primitive apes to spacefaring civilization, and now they were shutting down, and the barriers were falling, and suddenly we could see. Oh God, we could see. The universe wasn't empty. It never had been. Every star I'd ever looked at through a telescope, every point of light in the night sky, they were all battlefields, millions of them, billions. Civilizations fighting each other across distances our minds couldn't grasp, using weapons that made nuclear bombs look like firecrackers, dying in numbers that made Earth's entire population a rounding error. And all of it had been happening while we played in our little sandbox, protected by shields we didn't build, watched over by guardians we'd never seen. The shields fell completely, and the first enemy ships entered our space within minutes. We didn't see them coming. They appeared, already here, having crossed distances that should take years in the time it took me to blink. They weren't like anything I'd imagined aliens would be. They weren't ships in the sense we understood ships. They were wounds in space, tears in reality that moved with purpose, that left trails of altered physics in their wake, and when they touched something, a satellite, an asteroid, one of our scout ships, that thing ceased to exist in a way that suggested it had never existed at all. The Prometheus was 4 light minutes from Earth. I watched from the observation deck as those reality wounds descended on the homeworld, as defense platforms that could level cities opened fire with everything they had, and their weapons just stopped working, stopped being weapons, stopped being anything except memories of power we no longer possessed. I watched as the atmosphere caught fire, not from explosions, but from physics breaking down, from the fundamental rules of chemistry deciding they didn't apply anymore. I watched Earth die, and I couldn't do anything except stand there and scream into a comm channel nobody was answering anymore, while my home world burned and the realization hit me that we'd been children, and children don't get to choose when they grow up, and the universe had just forced us into adulthood at the worst possible moment, in the worst possible way. My crew was looking at me, waiting for orders, waiting for their commander to tell them what to do, how to fight, how to survive this. And I had nothing, no training for this, no contingency plans, no brilliant strategy that would save us, just the hollow certainty that we were already dead, we just hadn't stopped moving yet. But I'm still human, still stubborn, still angry enough to choose fighting over accepting the void, so I gave them something to do. Load every weapon we have, I said, my voice steady despite everything. Plot intercept courses. If we're dying today, we're taking some of these things with us. We burned toward Earth at speeds that would have torn the ship apart if we'd tried them during peacetime. We armed missiles, charged weapons that were designed to destroy other ships, but might scratch these reality wounds if we got lucky. We broadcasted on every channel, hoping someone somewhere was still alive to hear us, still fighting, still refusing to accept that this was the end. That's when the second transmission came through, different from the first, younger, desperate, human. This is Dr. Elizabeth Corvin, transmitting from Site Omega beneath Antarctica. If anyone can hear this, you need to know, the shields weren't meant to protect us from them. They were meant to protect them from us. Her voice was breaking, words tumbling over each other, like she knew she didn't have much time. We found records, ancient records in the structure beneath the ice. Humanity isn't native to this galaxy. We were seeded here by something older, something that lost a war 10,000 years ago and hid their last hope, us, behind barriers that would keep us isolated until we were ready. The war never ended. It just moved on while we grew. And now we're ready, except we don't know what we're supposed to do. We don't know how to fight enemies that exist in dimensions we can't perceive, and static. Then silence. Then her voice again, quieter now, resigned. They're here. The structure is opening. I can see them coming through. Tell whoever survives, we were meant to be a weapon. We were meant to be something that could end this war. But we grew wrong. We grew without them to guide us, and now we're just more casualties in a conflict that's been burning since before humans existed. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry we couldn't. The transmission cut out. I tried to raise her, tried to get any response from Antarctica. But there was nothing. Site Omega, whatever it had been, was gone. And with it, any explanation for why this was happening, why we'd been chosen for this, why the universe had decided that humanity's quarantine was over. We reached Earth's orbit and found chaos. The reality wounds were everywhere, tearing through satellites and defense stations like tissue paper. But something else was happening. Other ships were appearing. Not human, not the enemy. Something else entirely, vessels that looked grown rather than built, that moved through space like living things, and they were fighting. They were fighting the reality wounds, using weapons that sang, that made colors I'd never seen, that seemed to hurt the wounds, make them recoil, make them bleed light. A communication request came through. I accepted it, expecting nothing, receiving everything. The being on the screen was beautiful in a way that made me want to cry. Humanoid but not human, with skin that shifted through every color in existence and eyes that held depths I couldn't measure. When it spoke, the words came through in perfect English, but I could feel the translation happening, could sense the vast gulf between what it was saying and what I was hearing. Commander Evo, we are the remnant. We were allies of those who created you. We've been maintaining the shields, protecting your development, waiting for this moment. We had hoped for more time. We were wrong. What are we? I asked, needing to understand, needing something to make sense. Dr. Corvin said we were meant to be a weapon. What does that mean? The being's expression, if it was an expression, conveyed sadness deeper than oceans. Your species was engineered to perceive reality in ways the enemy cannot. You see in 3 dimensions, think in linear time, experience causality as a single thread. To them, reality is infinite possibility, all states existing simultaneously. They are powerful because they exist in all those possibilities at once. You are powerful because you exist in only one, because you can make choices that collapse those possibilities into single outcomes. You were meant to anchor reality against them, to make the universe solid where they make it fluid. "We don't know how to do that," I shouted. "Nobody taught us. We're just people trying to survive." "We know," the remnant said, and its voice carried the weight of civilizations lost, of failures that spanned millennia. "You were meant to have teachers, guides who would show you how to weaponize your nature. But they died in the last offensive, 1,000 years ago. We tried to wake you earlier, but the protocols wouldn't allow it. You had to reach a certain technological threshold. You had to find the structures. You had to announce yourselves. And now that you have, the enemy knows you exist. They're coming to eliminate you before you can become what you were designed to be." "Then teach us now," I demanded. "Show us how to fight them." "We don't know," the remnant admitted, and that admission was the most terrifying thing I'd heard. Your creators kept that knowledge secret. They feared it would be stolen, used against you. All we know is that you must choose. Every choice you make, every decision that could have gone differently, you collapse possibilities. You make reality real. If enough of you focus, if enough of you decide on a single outcome, you can force the universe to obey. You can make the enemy solid, vulnerable, killable. I looked at my crew. 23 people left out of the 50 who'd started this voyage. They were listening, understanding, faces showing the same desperate hope I was feeling. We'd been made for this, engineered for war, and we'd grown up innocent, peaceful, unprepared, but we could learn fast. Humans always did, when survival was on the line. "What do we need to do?" I asked. "You need to believe," the remnant said. "All of you, every human still alive. You need to look at the enemy and decide, truly decide, that they exist in only one state, that they are physical, that they can be destroyed. Your species has spent millennia developing the ability to share ideas, to communicate, to reach consensus. Use that now. Make humanity see the enemy as real, as solid, as mortal. Make the universe agree with you." It sounded insane. It sounded like magic, like wishful thinking, like the desperate lie you tell yourself before you die. But I'd seen the structures, I'd seen the shields, I'd watched physics break down and reality bend. If the universe was malleable enough to allow wounds in space, maybe it was malleable enough to let us fight back. "Prometheus to all human vessels," I transmitted on every channel, every frequency, hoping someone was listening. "This is Commander Alan Evo. I know you're scared. I know you're confused. I know the universe just showed us that everything we thought we knew was wrong, but we're not helpless. We were made for this, designed to fight an enemy that exists in quantum states, in infinite possibilities, and we fight them by choosing, by deciding, by making reality real through the force of our collective will." I paused, gathering my thoughts, knowing this might be the last thing I ever said. Look at the enemy. See them not as wounds, not as impossible things, but as ships, as physical objects with mass and position, and the ability to be destroyed. Believe it, choose it. Make the universe listen to us the way it's listened to them for 10,000 years. We are humanity. We survive. And today, we survive by making the impossible possible through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that we're beaten. I closed the channel and looked at my crew. Focus, all of you. Look at those reality wounds out there and decide they're ships, physical ships that our weapons can hit. They did. I could see it in their faces. The shift from fear to determination, from confusion to clarity. 23 minds deciding on a single truth, forcing that truth onto a universe that was flexible enough to listen. And the universe listened. The reality wounds changed, not drastically, not completely, but they became more solid, more there, less like concepts and more like things. I could see hulls now where before there had been only distortions. I could track their movements where before they'd seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously. "Fire everything," I ordered. The Prometheus unleashed its full arsenal. Missiles, railguns, energy weapons, all of it targeting the closest wound, the one that had become most solid under our collective belief. The weapons launched, trails of fire and fury cutting through the void, and for a heartbeat I thought we'd missed, thought our belief wasn't strong enough, thought we'd made a mistake that would cost us everything. Then the explosion came. Wrong in every way that mattered. Colors that shouldn't exist bleeding across space. Ultraviolet nightmares and infrared screams. Hues that made my eyes water and my brain insist I wasn't really seeing them. Sounds transmitted through the hull that violated physics, harmonics that suggested dimensions perpendicular to the three we inhabited, frequencies that made my teeth ache and my bones vibrate like they were trying to resonate themselves apart. But it was an explosion. The enemy ship, or whatever it was, shattered. Pieces of it spiraled away, trailing energy that burned like dying stars. Fragments that existed in multiple states simultaneously, even as they died, and through that chaos of impossible debris, I saw it. We'd hurt them. We'd proven they could be hurt. "Again!" I shouted, my voice raw with something between hope and rage. "Keep believing. Make them real. Make them mortal." The crew responded with a focus I'd never seen in training, in simulation, in any of the boring operations that defined our peacetime service. Weapons Officer Evo, no relation, just one of those coincidences that seemed cosmically ironic now, was crying as she worked her console, tears streaming down her face while her hands moved with mechanical precision, targeting, firing, confirming kills, moving to the next target. Engineering Chief Kowalski was screaming obscenities at his monitors, his voice hoarse, demanding more power from systems that were already past their limits, cursing physics itself for not being flexible enough. Navigator Price had gone silent, her eyes closed, her lips moving in what might have been prayer or might have been calculations, but I could feel her belief radiating like heat, like she was pulling reality into shape through sheer force of mathematical certainty. She opened her eyes suddenly and said, "Commander, if we adjust heading by 7 degrees and maintain that vector, their formation has a weak point. I can't explain how I know, but I know. We can break through." I trusted her. In a universe where belief shaped reality, where quantum mechanics danced to the tune of conscious observation, trusting someone's inexplicable knowledge felt less crazy than trying to understand it. Helm, 7 degrees starboard, all power to forward shields. More ships were joining us now. Human vessels from across the solar system, what was left of Earth's defense fleet, mining ships and cargo haulers and colony transports. Anything that could mount a weapon was burning toward the enemy. The mining vessel, Hammer's Fall, designed to crack asteroids, was using its industrial lasers to carve through enemy hulls that had gone solid under humanity's collective focus. The cargo hauler Free Trader, captained by some merchant I'd never met, had jury-rigged nuclear charges to its cargo containers and was ramming enemy ships, detonating on impact, trading its own destruction for theirs in a calculus of desperation that somehow balanced. I could feel it happening across the solar system, billions of minds focusing on a single truth. The enemy is real. The enemy is physical. The enemy can be killed. Children on evacuation ships pressing their faces to viewports and deciding the scary ships were just ships. Scientists in bunkers analyzing the enemy and classifying them, categorizing them, making them concrete through academic rigor. Artists in shelters sketching what they saw on screens, rendering the impossible into art, into fixed images, into reality frozen on paper. We can hurt them. They can be killed. Reality is what we say it is. The battle raged across Earth's orbit like a storm made of fire and physics breaking down. The remnant ships fought alongside us, their weapons beautiful and terrible, beams that sang in frequencies that made space itself weep, projectiles that moved through dimensions we couldn't perceive to strike from impossible angles, shields that turned incoming fire into flowers of crystallized mathematics that bloomed and died in nanoseconds. And slowly, impossibly, we were winning. Not because we were stronger, not because we had better technology, but because we'd done something the enemy never expected. We'd agreed on what was real, and that agreement gave us power they couldn't counter. Every human mind focused on the same truth created a weight, a gravitation in the quantum foam that underlies reality, and that weight was forcing the universe to choose our version of events over theirs. But the cost. Oh God, the cost. Earth was burning. Luna was cracked like an egg, its surface glowing with heat that would take centuries to cool. Mars was dead. Venus's toxic clouds were lit from within by energies that would render it uninhabitable for millennia. We were winning the battle and losing everything we'd built, and through it all, more enemy ships kept coming. Thousands, millions. The war of 1,000,000 suns wasn't a metaphor, it was a census. 1,000,000 stars, each one a battlefield, each one fighting this same war between reality as it was and reality as it could be. We'd joined that war. We'd proven we could fight, but we were one solar system against a galaxy of combatants, and the math was not in our favor. The remnant commander appeared on screen again. Commander Evo, we must retreat. The solar system is lost, but you've proven what you are. You've shown that humanity can anchor reality. Other remnant fleets are coming. We can evacuate survivors, rebuild elsewhere, train your species properly this time. Retreat? I looked at Earth, at the home I'd never see again, at the graves of 8 billion people who died without understanding why. To where? There are hidden systems, places the enemy hasn't found. You can survive there, you can grow stronger, you can become what you were meant to be and return to reclaim what was lost. It made sense, it was logical, it was survival. But as I looked at my crew, at the determination in their eyes, at the way they'd learned to weaponize their humanity in the space of an hour, I realized something. We weren't meant to hide. That's what had been done to us for 10,000 years. We'd been hidden, protected, kept in the dark like children, and look how that had turned out. No, I said, we fight here. We hold the line. Because if we run now, we're saying that Earth didn't matter, that Mars didn't matter, that the billions who died today died for nothing. I won't accept that. You'll die, the remnant said, and it wasn't a threat, just a fact. Maybe, I agreed, but we'll die making a choice. We'll die of collapsing possibilities. We'll die being exactly what we were designed to be, anchors of reality in a universe gone mad. And maybe that will inspire someone else. Maybe some other species will see what humans did here and decide they can fight too. Maybe we will lose Earth, but start winning the war. The remnant was silent for a long moment. Then, "You are so young, so unprepared." But perhaps that's what was needed. Perhaps experience only teaches you what's impossible. Goodbye, Commander Evo. May your sacrifice not be forgotten. The remnant ships vanished, folding space, disappearing into whatever hidden dimensions they came from, and we were alone, the Prometheus and 47 other human ships, facing an armada that stretched from Earth to the asteroid belt, an enemy that had conquered 1,000,000 suns and was about to add ours to their collection. I thought about fear then, about how it worked, about how it was just your brain trying to keep you alive by making you cautious, making you hesitate. And I realized that fear required a future. It required the possibility that you might survive if you just made the right choice. But when survival was impossible, when every option led to the same ending, fear became irrelevant. What was left was just the purity of action. The freedom that came from knowing your choices mattered only in the moment, only in what they said about who you were. "All ships," I transmitted, "we're going to die today. Let's make sure they remember why they should have left us in quarantine. We charged 48 ships against millions, our weapons blazing, our crews focusing reality into a spear point sharp enough to cut through quantum uncertainty. We made the enemy solid, made them vulnerable, made them mortal, and we killed them. We killed thousands of them, made them pay in blood and metal for every inch of space they took, made them understand that humanity wasn't just another species to be harvested. We were something new, something dangerous, something that could hurt them. The Prometheus took hit after hit. Hull breaches venting atmosphere, engines failing, weapons overheating. My crew died one by one, pulled into vacuum, crushed by debris, burned by energies that shouldn't exist. And with each death, the survivors focused harder, believed stronger, made reality even more rigid, even more real, even more deadly to an enemy that relied on quantum flexibility. I was the last one left on the bridge when the final hit came. The explosion tore through the ship's spine, sent me flying into bulkheads, left me bleeding on the deck with red warning lights flashing and sirens screaming that life support was failing. I couldn't move, couldn't feel my legs, could barely see through the blood running into my eyes. But I could see the view screen. I could see Earth, burning and broken, but still there, still spinning, still refusing to disappear. I could see the enemy fleet, diminished now, smaller than when they'd arrived, forced to commit more resources to this one tiny system than they'd planned. I could see the distant stars, the 1,000,000 suns still burning, still fighting their own battles. And I understood then what we'd done. Not won. We couldn't win, but we'd proven something. We'd shown that humans could be weapons, could anchor reality, could force the universe to obey. Word would spread. The remnant would tell others. Other species would hear about the upstart civilization that joined the war for only an hour, but fought like they'd been training for millennia. They'd hear about Earth's last stand, about the day humanity looked at impossible odds and said, "Not good enough." We'd lost our home, lost our future, lost everything except our defiance. But maybe that was enough. Maybe in a war spanning 1,000,000 suns, burning across 10,000 years, fought by entities that barely understood each other, maybe one species choosing to stand and fight rather than hide was a victory in itself. My vision was fading. The cold was setting in, the kind that no heater could fix because it came from inside, from the body shutting down, from the universe reclaiming the energy it had loaned me for this brief moment of consciousness. I thought about my family on Earth, gone now, and about the crew who'd followed me into this final battle, and about Sarah Voss and her violin, and the daughter she'd left behind who was probably dead, but might somehow, have escaped. I thought about my choice, about how we'd spent 10,000 years in quarantine, learning to be human, learning to communicate, learning to share ideas and reach consensus. All of it prepares us for this moment. All of it taught us to do the one thing the enemy couldn't, to agree on what was real. The view screen went dark, the sirens stopped, the cold reached my chest, my heart, my thoughts, and in my last moment, I chose to believe something impossible, that this mattered, that our sacrifice would ripple through the war, would inspire others, would change the equation in ways we couldn't predict. I chose to believe we won, and in a universe where belief shapes reality, where choice collapses possibility, where humanity's gift was making the universe listen, maybe I was right. The Prometheus died in fire and void, one more corpse in a graveyard spanning light years, one more casualty in a war without end. But somewhere in the dark, the remnant remembered. Somewhere in the cold between stars, other species heard the story of Earth's last day. Somewhere in the quantum foam that underlies reality, a choice I made echoed forward through time, through space, through dimensions I couldn't perceive. Humanity joined the war of 1,000,000 suns. We fought for 1 hour. We lost everything, but we never surrendered, and that, in the end, was worth dying for. The stars burn on, indifferent and eternal. The war continues without us. But in the dark, in the spaces between battles, some survivors whisper our name, some remember Earth, some tell their children about the species that chose defiance over survival, that weaponized their humanity, that forced reality itself to bend. We were here, we mattered, we chose, and that choice will outlive the stars.